Jesse Reiser and Nanako Umamoto are the founding partners of Reiser and Umamoto, an internationally recognized architectural firm based in New York City. Their work encompasses a wide range of scales from furniture design to landscape and infrastructure. Jesse Reiser is a professor of architecture at Princeton University. Nanako Umamoto is currently a visiting professor at the Southern California Institute of Architecture in Los Angeles. In addition to teaching together at Columbia University, they have individually taught and lectured at various educational and cultural institutions throughout the United States, Europe, and Asia, and their work has been widely published for over 20 years. Reiser and Umamoto have been generating some of the most provocative thinking in the field for nearly 20 years, and in Atlas of Novel Tectonics, Reiser and Umamoto hone in on the many facets of architecture and present the theories they have established over the last 20 years. Reiser and Umamoto see architectural design as a series of problem situations, and each chapter is an argument devoted to a specific condition or case. The result is an explanation of the concepts that guide Reiser and Umamoto through their own design process and a series of meditations on topics that have formed their own sense as architects. Atlas of Novel Tectonics offers an entirely fresh perspective on subjects that are generally taken for granted. The result is an explanation of the concepts that guide Reiser and Umamoto through their design process, and a series of meditations on topics that have formed their own sense of architects. Atlas of Novel Tectonics offers an entirely fresh perspective on subjects that are generally taken for granted, and the result of this is an insight into Reiser and Umamoto and the concepts that guide them through their own design process. At first, the title of the book may seem complicated and cause the less experienced reader to feel daunted. However, it helps to understand the title of the book if we break it down. It is essentially a book of illustrations and diagrams on new, interesting ways to construct a building. The book features a series of short, punchy chapters on different subject matters. The short entries are full of references to architecture and culture at large, as well as the relationship and influence the two have on one another. The book features a series of short, punchy chapters on different subject matters. The short entries are full of references to architecture and culture at large, as well as the relationship and influence the two have on one another. The book features the work of Reiser and Umamoto, as well as an amazing insight into their thought and design process. The book covers 5 main themes outlined by its chapters. The book is devoted to explaining concepts, and these concepts arise within each of the sections. These sections are broken down further into mostly double-page spreads which focus on single ideas. Reiser and Umamoto question the norms of architecture in terms of these themes and suggest their way of addressing them. In essence, the book is a criticism. Reiser and Umamoto write in the book, "We see the architectural design as a series of specific problem situations that, contrary to the discursive disciplines, cannot be argued away." The book brings to light many other architects and writers and their views on these ideas and elaborates on them. With each idea comes the theme of multiplicity, which Reiser and Umamoto insist should be produced in any and all kinds of tectonics. This means, according to the book, that architectural solutions are not free of the categories that they dismiss. For example, functionalism completely dismisses any kind of decoration or ornament. However, if this dismissal is recognized, the possibility of decorative function is recognized. It does not create a whole new outlook on architecture, but rather seeks to move modernism to new and unforeseen territories. Overall, we see the book, although very insightful, as being biased towards Reiser and Uemoto's own views on architecture, rather than being a proper atlas which would normally give a more general view. Any classical modernist which would most probably have a completely opposing view to most of these proposed in this book. Any classical modernist which would most probably have a completely opposing view to most of these proposed in this book. We will be discussing the first two chapters, Geometry and Matter. These are both the large chapters and convey most of Reiser and Uemoto's thinking. In this section, Reiser and Uemoto discuss finding balance in architecture, and instead of choosing one extreme or the other, finding a good amount of both extremes is the answer. Fineness is the fact that architecture deals with not a single material or surface, but multiple materials and surfaces. A building can be broken down into finer and finer parts. This argument takes the example of a sponge. If it is too fine, it acts as like a homogeneous solid, and too coarse, it becomes constrained by its members. Similarly, architecture should find the balance between geometry and force, and not let them be constrained by each other. The book suggests that even in the most incoherent architecture, there is a coherence in the system of the building. This is extensive. Intensive properties, on the other hand, are properties such as temperature or pressure, which cannot be so divided. Reiser and Uemoto use the example of a pot of boiling water. If it was split in half, each half has half the mass of the whole. However, these halves are just as hot as when it was whole. The temperature is therefore intensive. This book suggests in architecture we should practice intensively, meaning that when scales change, for example halves, quality should not be halved as well. Instead, performance and proportion should enter new relationships with this change. The book questions and even dismisses Aristotle's concept of the mean as over-heroic. For example, according to Aristotle, the mean in between rashness and cowardice is courage, and the mean in between boastfulness and understatement is truthfulness. Reiser and Uemoto suggest instead of looking for the mean, we should concentrate on operating in a state of poise where rash, cowardice and boastful understatements exist. The state of poise seeks a dynamic tension between them. The firm approaches each project as the continuation of an ongoing inquiry, delving into relationships among architecture, territory and systems of distribution. By working on projects of varying scales, from the architectural to the regional, the firm has developed flexible strategies and techniques that seek to open structures that are now ossified and to integrate domains that historically have been kept apart. The Atlas of Novel Tectonics follows the tradition of 19th century atlases. Illustration-like historical printings, in between glue-coloured prints and many graphs. Again, the diagram is shown as a design tool, showing the form-finding process as a matter of scientific investigation. The text is rich and overworded and often overcomplicates scenarios with unnecessary complexity. This being said, the large partially glued images and vast amount of diagrams and illustrations add to the book and help Reiser and Uemoto to express their theories. The evidence used in the book is mostly quotes from other theorists and books which reiterate the points. But there are also many examples of their theories in practice with imagery to support these points.